So, here's an interesting concept for you, and bear with me if you've heard this before. Kid finds mystical powers, kid suddenly becomes a massive badass, kid protects friends. If you've already heard the premise before, that's probably because it's been the trope of many anime series throughout history. However, this one has a very special place to my heart. Besides the fact that I collected the trading cards like crazy, it also was the original origin story for the characters. And sadly, until years ago, I had no idea that it actually existed. But with the advent of the internet and people around, I have managed to watch some of it. And, well, it's time to talk about it. Because today on the anime G.B.U, I'm talking about Yugioh, the series. But I'm talking about not Duel Monsters that we know and love. No. Because that's 5 seasons long, and God knows how long that's going to take me to review. No. Today I'm talking about Yugioh Season 0, that the fans have so dubbed. And honestly, it's going to be a lot of fun. So sit back, grab your Millennium Puzzle, and let's do a Yami no game together, shall we? Today on the anime G.B.U. Now, you've no doubt seen something like this before. If you have, well, then you at least know what I'm going to be talking about. This is the Millennium Puzzle. Well, it's actually a cosplay item that I picked up on eBay of the Millennium Puzzle, which is actually pretty cool. And it does break into a puzzle, though some of the pieces I'm going to have to super glue, which will still make it a puzzle. And honestly, one it's a little easier to get apart. But excuse me for 1 second, so I can put it back into its sacred holder. I call it a Ziploc bag, so I don't lose any of it. But anyway, I'm not alone in this. See, Yugioh Season 0 is basically the manga series that originally started the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. Now, the Yu-Gi-Oh that many of us know is actually Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. And this is its predecessor. If you've ever seen the Yu-Gi-Oh manga series in Shonen Jump, you know what I'm talking about. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters took place during the Duel Monsters era that we know, and before the card game actually began existing in the real world, there was Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0. And instead of battling just pure duel monsters, it was every different game you could imagine, from board games to video games to monster chess. The world was endless with this. And honestly, for good reason. It was quite enjoyable and still is. Majority of the episodes can be found online. In fact, the clips of them can be found up on YouTube under the Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0 is because. And I highly recommend checking them out for starters. Weird glasses. But anyway, the series itself deals with the young boy named Yugi Moto, who every day plays a different game. And for the last 8 years has been trying to solve the Millennium Puzzle, which, if completed, is supposed to do one of two things. Either grant its user an unbelievably amount of dark magic, or grant them a wish. Now, the dark magic also comes with massive knowledge in the dark arts, or the wish, which is what Yugi believes. And what's Yugi's wish? Well, he wants friends. That's right, he wants a true friend. And so enter Joey, or Johanda, or Joichi, and honestly, I'm just going to say this, I'm going to call them by their English names because it's a lot easier on my mind. I'm not even joking. So for those of you out there that want to know what their actual names are, Jinochi-kun is Joey, Honda-kun is Tristan, what the hell is her name? Tei's character's name escapes me at the moment, and then there's Miho, the character that was added, ironically, in this manga series, but that we never hear from again. The franchise starts off quite easily, and I'm just going to explain episode 1 of this, since the majority of it follows the same path line of Monster, Monster is basically the person that's being evil in this. The Yami no game, Yugi taking on his alter form, and basically doing a Yami no game or a shadow game, and pretty much winning the day. So, yeah, I'm just gonna give you episode 1, which is the simplest recap I can give. The series itself does get quite confusing with the introduction of Seto and Mokuba Kaiba, as well as Bakura and Dark Bakura. So, yeah, it does get a little confusing, but a lot more interesting too. There are a few dozen other characters that get thrown in as well, but they're either one episode people to deal with, or honestly, I just don't remember them or care anymore. So, let's start off with episode 1. So what happens after Yugi tries to solve the Millennium Puzzle? Well, it turns out he's a piece short. Why? Because when Joey found out that Yugi was once again screwing around with his Millennium Puzzle, instead of actually trying to be a man, he took it from him and chucked it into the river by the school. So, how does Yugi react to this? He just shows up to the school to try to find it, where he's confronted by the school's quote-unquote guardian of sorts. And what does the school's guardian do? Well, if he's if he's the person there, he beats the crap out of Joey and Tristan for picking on poor Yugi. That's right. He beat the crap out of him. So what exactly happened after that? Well, it's actually quite entertaining. He demanded money from Yugi for bodyguard services. Yeah, he kiss off. Anyway, when Yugi refuses to pay him because he doesn't really have the money, he proceeds to beat the living crap out of Yugi. And this all after Yugi comes back to the school to look for the final piece of the Millennium Puzzle, which he had lost, or believed to be lost. Joey, on the other hand, had already fished the piece out of the river after hearing Yugi say the words, "But why would I want you to beat up my friends?" They were his friends. They were just trying to help him grow up and be less childish. Granted, they could have gone about it in less of a half-assed way, but they still did it nonetheless. Anyway, because he got his ass whooped, Joey and Tristan decided it's time for them to start whooping some ass and taking some names. Sadly, they fail miserably at this, of course, and are left with no other choice but to have Yugi save the day. How? Because Yugi places the final piece into the Millennium Puzzle, awakening the dark spirit that lived inside of it for millennia. And what does he do when he arrives? He does a Yami no game and beats the crap out of the guy. Not physically, of course, because that's not Yugi's style. No. Yugi's more of the mental torture type. That's what I kind of like. The game he plays with the guy is a simple up and down card game. You draw a card and you go up the water tower. Depending on how high up you go, depends on what card you drew. So a 4 of diamonds will move you up 4 spaces. They take turns alternating going up and down to see who can get up closest to the top to retrieve the money that Yugi claims to have had to pay the guy for the bodyguarding services. He's an idiot if he actually thought he was going to get paid. Anyway, during the match, the person ends up getting the Joker. Yugi ends up winning, but because he does not want to take defeat lying down, the other guy climbs the tower cheating, and Yugi basically says that he's broken the rules, and now a punishment game will begin. The punishment? He basically just has his mind sort of destroyed. He thinks he's being eaten alive by eels in the water, and in all honesty, he probably could have been in his mind. But it leaves him in a fetal position, crying, which shocks the crap out of everybody else at school. Therefore, his reputation shot to hell, and Yugi now has 2 new friends, and a completed Millennium Puzzle that took him 8 years to do. So, what does all this mean for the series? Well, it's an interesting series. Now, yes, there's some good, some bad, and some ugly in this, and honestly, I'm going to get into it. Like I said, I'm not going to go through every single episode and give an entire synopsis of this. It's about 27 episodes long. It's not really that bad. And like I said, most of the episodes are available on YouTube to check out in clips. It's not exactly a bad way to go either, since it cuts out a majority of the filler stuff that you would need for the episode. You get introduced to the characters, you learn about their plights, and even the special that this thing had is on YouTube as well. There's basically, you get introduced to Joey's sister, There's the love affair that kind of happens, the one-sided love between Tristan and Miho, and so on and so forth. So that works out pretty cool. Oh, and I finally remembered the name of the character. Her name's Anzu. That's Teia's character. I just thought of it. So let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly, shall we? So what's good about this series? Well, for starters, I like the design that this gives off, where every single game could technically be a Yami no game, or basically anything for that matter. You could come up with something on the fly, there's a Yami no game for you. Like the episode where Yami Yugi, or Dark Yugi, or Ultra Yugi, or however you want to call him, basically took on a person whose main power is chloroforming people, after he lies about their fortunes. Yugi took a weapon. How did Yugi win? Because the guy went and grabbed the wrong bottle. Each one was tied to a string. The strings were all attached to a part of the clock, and as the minute hand went through, it was cutting the string, and they had to catch it before it fell. But they didn't know which string was attached to what. Therefore, you didn't know which bottle was going to fall and had to move quickly. It's pretty interesting. There's also a teacher that decided she wanted to, quote-unquote, use her power for wrong and try to create more problems throughout the school, and she was instantly shown the error of her ways, quite permanently, mind you, by showing her that even what she considered to be beauty was cut skin deep, and that evilness can show even if you're trying not to. Because every time she tried putting on makeup after losing to Yugi, it would begin to crack as well as her face. Sadly, it was just a method of the Yami no game that she fell for. There have been many other ones included in this, and like I said, each one of them is unique in its own way, especially the Monster Chess ones, and the finale Monster World game that was played with Bakura, where our main heroes are trapped in the board game, and alternate Yugi has to save the day. There was also another interesting plot that was brought up with another quote-unquote item that was sort of like this ancient dragon jar thing that somebody else in Yugi's class had found, and it got opened and they became possessed by it, attempting to steal the souls of anyone who battled them and lost. While Yugi himself lost, alternate Yugi managed to just barely squeak out a win by holding on to his Millennium Puzzle that was currently being held hostage by the other player. Because of that, he was able to quickly take over Yugi's body, and because the Millennium Puzzle's unique characteristics allow him to pretty much, quote-unquote, save the day, it's actually not a bad thing. So, here's what's interesting the most about it, and the last good point that I have to make, is the fact that even though this doesn't lead into Duel Monsters, it does in fact actually give a wonderful introduction to the characters that we'll see in Duel Monsters. Now, some of them basically get reintroduced and completely forget the origins of them originally, but some of the other ones we do get introduced to, like Seto and Mokubu Kaiba, Grandpa Moto, just to name the three off the top of my head that have a prominent role. So, what's bad about this series? Well, even though I like the Yami no games and I like the way some of the stuff is done, the story does take a massive back seat. It's pretty much a cut and dry, you know what's going to happen, Yugi's going to save the day sort of deal. While it's not bad in general, it's just one of those annoying things that you know what's going to happen. It's like buying a brand new mystery book only to realize you know how it's going to end because all the other books in the series end the exact same way. The butler did it, or the maid did it, or the dog did it. That's what this series feels like when you watch it for the first time. Otherwise, it's not bad. Then there's the other side of the coin. Knowing that does make you not want to watch it, but yet you're intrigued enough to watch it, wanting to know what the main story is that led up to Yugi saving the day. There's an entire arc where they're trying to rescue Yugi's grandpa after Seto Kaiba kind of kidnaps him, and then there's the infamous Yugi versus Seto duel in the Monster World thing, not once but twice, and then the massive battle against Bakura at the end of the series. On honestly all good things, but they're good things that get a wee bit annoying over and over and over again. One thing to mention that I also find bad about this is the fact that even though he's shown using it in the opening, which by the way is kick-ass, he never actually uses the Dark Magician. The only time it's ever used is in the special with the Red Eyes Black Dragon, which Yugi only used because the person that had the red eyes didn't want to use it. He was terrified that if he used it, something bad would happen. So Yugi used it instead, but refused to use it until the person said it was okay. So, yeah. You win with Exodia in the series, but will use Red Eyes in the special. That's a big screw you to us, isn't it? That's what I thought. But we talked about the good, we talked about the bad. Let's talk about the ugly, shall we? And there's a couple ugly points I want to point out in this. One, this is heavily dark. I'm not a huge fan of dark style anime series, and this one will get a bit of a pass on me, but it's still ugly for the fact that it goes this route. You know what's going to happen when the music starts playing and Yugi changes into Yami Yugi. While nobody technically knows it's Yugi, his alter ego being held a secret, Taya suspects it, but she doesn't 100% know. They're only finally clued into it at the end of the series with the ultimate battle against Bakura. So, yeah, all that build-up for that, while entertaining, was a bit of a letdown. Then there's also the whole Seto Kaiba thing. After getting his ass whooped and mind-crushed by Yugi, he pretty much just disappears, never to be heard from again. Not to darken a doorway or piss somebody off. And honestly, I don't understand the concept of that. He still could have been a character, just have him seen somewhere down the road. But, alright, fine, whatever. The only other ugly part that I have to complain about is the fact that you introduce a character in this that you're never going to see again. And of course, I'm talking about Miho. We never see her again outside of this series. She's not in any of the Duel Monsters seasons, and honestly, she was like the ditz in this season to begin with. So it's not really a love loss, but it's the fact that we don't see her ever again that pisses me off. Fans could have easily gotten to know her and like her, but now we don't get a chance to outside of the one series she was in, which is 27 episodes long plus a special. And honestly, there could be more specials too, I don't know, but at least one special I've seen in 27 episodes. And honestly, well, fine and dandy as it is, I still have some regrets about that. She did have a couple episodes dedicated to herself, but again, they mostly revolved around Yugi saving the day, mostly because she was naive enough to have fallen into the trap in the first place. It makes no sense at all that her character was even in the series other than just being filler and fodder for some of the other characters to screw around with. Tristan liked her a lot, he wanted to do anything he could to be near her and fall in love with her, and in all honesty, she felt like she was way out of place with the rest of the group. You had Joey, who was the tough guy, Taya, who was the kind, caring, compassionate one to Yugi, and then you had Yugi, who was basically Yugi, the naive child. But then you have Miho, who's basically the naive older child. You don't need two naive people in a series. Some of the other characters had good redeeming qualities about them. Taya got a little annoyed when Yugi basically got treated very specially by this one girl who was basically after a Duel Monsters card that he had gotten. It was the third witch card, the purple witch, to go along with the other two cards that her sisters had had, the red and I think it was yellow witch. But that ended up being one of the few times where Yugi couldn't save the day, and the day was actually saved by Seto Kaiba, who showed up out of nowhere, kicked some ass, and walked away. One of the few instances when Yugi didn't save the day, but it still felt underwhelming above everything else. Other characters have had their plot points done and done correctly, but throughout the whole thing, I felt like Miho was just shown as the ditzy, klutzy, naive older child that we were forced to deal with. And honestly, I just couldn't stand that. But, who knows? But don't worry, because next season, I guarantee you it's going to be a lot more fun. Because I'm going to be talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, which is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series that we know here in the States. With it being 5 seasons long, I can't exactly do it all in one shot. It'll drive me up a tree. So get ready for Season 1 of Duel Monsters next season on the anime G.B.U. But for my final verdict for Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0 that the fans have dubbed it Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0, but it's just Yu-Gi-Oh! My final verdict for Yu-Gi-Oh! Check it out. It's actually worth it, and it's readily available. You can find clips of it on YouTube. Just type in Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0, and they will come up like water. I'm not even joking. It's worth your time checking out. There are some good points in it, and some good plots and stories. But keep in mind, most of the stuff on here is just my own opinion. And that's about it. So until next time, I'm Andrew Rhodes, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on this episode of the Anime G.B.U.